What up? We're back. We're doing this again. Yeah, so I just got done recording one of these, and for whatever reason, my mic audio was not picking up. So it was like it was a longer one too. But hey, sometimes that happens. If you want to know what that was, I mean, I'm gonna be getting into this dude's videos. Let's look. I'll show you which one I was watching. It had to do with like plasma and shit. So Mars. It was about Mars. Look up this one if you want to kind of get the gist of that one. I'm looking up back to the moon. Saw he had a moon video. I like this guy's videos. I don't know. He's kind of interesting. Has a cool perspective. Yeah, if I keep looking over my shoulder and stuff, it's because I just got a new kitty, and he's kind of just running around causing trouble. The old kitty Don, he's not too sure of it yet, but he's just chilling. He's keeping his distance. He's like weirdly afraid of the new kitty. I mean, if he comes around, if he starts running around, I'll try to grab him and show him off, but I don't have a name yet, so let me know what I should name him. Sure, I'll have a name by the end of the day here, but whatever. I like knowing names anyway. All right. Anyway, yeah, this guy just breaks down all these like anomalies and kind of breaks down like the evidence behind it all. He was getting into like electric universe theory and stuff like that in the last one, but let's see what he's got to say about the moon. I wonder if he thinks we should get rid of it, because I have a feeling this is just going to reinforce that I want to get rid of this. The damn moon.
So the first thing worth noting is that the
get into it.
scientific explanation for the moon's existence is still an ongoing debate. The story that we've been told about it being ejected from the early Earth has more holes in it than any other explanation. As
Nice.
Dr. Robin Brett of NASA is quoted as saying, "It seems much easier to explain the non-existence of the moon than to explain its existence." A quote that reminds us how often we take things that are right in front of our faces for granted. Let's quickly run through the moon's impossibilities so that we can get to our speculation. We can only see one side of the moon. This tidal lock is called synchronous rotation, and no other planetary bodies act this way. And there are upwards of 300 moons in our solar system. It was claimed a while back that Pluto had a moon that acts like this, but that turned out to not be so. And if you ask me, it is awfully convenient to claim this as a debunk, considering that Pluto is the one planet that we as civilians have no chance of seeing with home telescopes. The first time that humans have seen the far side of the moon, allegedly, was the Apollo astronauts flying around the back before landing. They had arguments whether or not to report this, what they saw. The conversation that took place that day is surprisingly open domain, yet ignored by most. Eugene Cernan asked his crewmates, and I quote, "Do you hear that whistling sound? That sounds like weird music," where Young responded, "Are we going to call them about it?" To which Cernan replied, "I don't know, we ought to think about it some, nobody will believe us." Strangely enough, the same sound was picked up by
Yeah, that's weird. Going somewhere no one's ever been and being like, no, we can't report this. We can't let people know we're hearing this because they won't believe us. It's like, I don't know, man. No one's been there. I feel like people would believe it, right? If you have never been there.
Saturn. So Saturn and our moon seem to vibe out with the same music. The sound coming from Saturn can be explained by its magnetic field. However, the moon generating the same noise is one of many more impossibilities that we will see. Our moon is 27% the size of Earth, making it impossibly too big in ratio to our planet. The Earth, a planet this size, cannot hold something that large in orbit unless it is impossibly lightweight. For example, massive planets like Jupiter and Saturn have a ton of moons, none of which are even close to the size of our moon. Our moon is bigger than Pluto. It is also much closer to Earth than any other moon in the solar system is to its planet. So too big and too close to make sense. The orbit of the moon is almost a perfect circle, again making it staggeringly different than any other moon in our solar system, as moons are typically very elliptical. Now, how about those craters? All of the craters on the moon are about the same depth and far too shallow. No matter what hits the moon, it doesn't drive into it very far, making it seem like there is a protective shell just beneath the surface. Bringing up one of my favorite internet searches of all time. When I type the question into Bing, why are all the craters on the moon the same depth? It says, and I cannot make this shit up, no, the depth of a crater on the moon depends on the type, size, and speed of the impactor, and on the type of surface it impacted on. However, it has been noted that all craters on the moon seem to have about the same depth, irrespective of size and mass and of the impacting object. So basically it says, no, the craters on the moon are not the same depth, but yes, the craters on the moon are the same depth. So again, another reason that I think I'll stick to researching.
I think that answer, it's saying like, no, it's you can't, like, not all craters could be the same depth, but they are on the moon. I think is how I'm hearing that. You know what I mean? It might be saying like craters would depend on how big the thing is, the velocity, all that stuff. But on the moon, they're not.
Instead
so
of
those aren't craters.
But what are the chances of over 9,000 craters being the same depth? When on any other planetary body, including Earth, we can barely find 2 that match the same depth. But now I can't help but bring up another one of my favorite internet searches about the craters on the moon. There is a tutorial on how to mimic moon craters at home with baking materials. A very fun project to do with the kids. However, what they seem to be forgetting to say is that this experiment only works if there is a firm baking sheet beneath the dusty baking ingredients. So, speaking of moon dust, we are about to get a lot more weird. It is saturated in radioactive fuel. Astronauts have said that moon dust both smells and tastes like gunpowder, raising a lot of other questions, but let's move on for now. Besides its chemical makeup of uranium-236 and neptunium-237, both of which are elements that have never been found to occur naturally. Moon rock is approximately 2 billion years older than Earth rock, and 1 billion years older than the forming of our solar system. And I mean, what the fuck is that? Basically concluding that the moon and Earth were not only formed at different times, but also formed in different places. On Earth, soil is newer at the surface and older as you dig deeper, which goes without saying, of course. But we have to say it because the exact opposite is true for the moon. It is as if the ancient rock from the heart of the moon was pulled out and then dumped onto the surface and leveled. The metals on the moon are not only found to be artificial, but they are the same metals that we have used to reinforce powerful and strong structures like buildings, kind of like an impenetrable shell. However, we use beams. We use steel beams, which can't be melted by jet.
Yeah, right the fuck on, bro. Hell yeah.
So now let's talk
Nice.
about these perfectly
I like
impossible
tying in
eclipses.
9/11 to the
I'm
moon.
sure everyone watching this already knows that the moon is 400 times smaller than the sun and exactly 400 times closer to the Earth, which is what causes these perfect eclipses, making it even weirder that the moon is so large and so close to Earth because eclipses like this don't happen on any other planet. Both mathematicians and astronomers have deemed the possibility of the moon and the sun appearing in the sky as the same size
So
to
it's a
be
very
almost
Freemason
impossible.
looking.
What is lesser known, though, is that the moon is rotating at a rate of 400 kilometers per Earth day, which is what causes it to hide its backside. So that is 3 400s in a row. I mean, what a coinky dink. Keep in mind that these 400s are in base 10 mathematics, the same mathematical system that we use today, because we have 10 fingers. The venerable Isaac Asimov had this to say about it. The sheer astronomical accident that the moon fits so snugly over the sun is remarkable. There is no astronomical reason why the moon and the sun should fit so well. Only the Earth among all planets is blessed in this fashion. The weak anthropic principle, or WAP for short, is a theory that has been adopted by many scholars. Sorry, some of the jokes just write themselves. But WAP is a theory adopted by many scholars that the conditions required for a perfect solar eclipse are the same conditions generally acknowledged to be necessary for intelligent life to emerge. So how about this whole hollow controversy? On 2 separate occasions, the moon has been measured to, quote, ring like a bell when impacted. These moonquakes are much different than earthquakes. When the Earth vibrates at the surface, the vibration reduces in power per the depth of measurement. This makes sense because the density of Earth increases with depth. The moon is, again, the opposite. When it was struck and rang like a bell for 3 hours, the vibes became more powerful over time and with depth. In fact, the measurements showed the vibration of the ringing to be the most powerful at 40 miles below the surface, as if there is some kind of giant opening there. Even though this helps us understand how the Earth is able to hold on to such a gigantic object, it seems to reinforce the conundrum of the idea that the moon was at some point hollowed out, something that absolutely cannot happen naturally. So it answers one question, but it raises 50 more. Now, there are a ton of other impossible anomalies, like boulders rolling uphill, often weird atmospheric haze and lights that move around on the surface of the moon that you can read about for yourself. But for the sake of brevity, I would like to move on to the next subject here, because equally important, we need to talk about Ingo Swann. His story is just as unbelievable as the above mentioned, and also just as impossibly true. One thing that the military, the CIA, law enforcement detectives, and several other government agencies have in common is using psychics on a regular basis to a great rate of success. Most common examples would be like finding lost ships and sunken airplanes. So while we are out here buying the mainstream narrative that the mind is confined to the brain, the very people employing that narrative are out there reaping the benefits of these abilities. Ingo Swann was one of the many who definitively proved his ability to remote view. His remote viewing was so accurate that he was employed by the CIA to spy on military complexes all over the world, from the comfort of an office right here in the US. These CIA government documents are no longer classified, by the way. You can check them out for yourself. But as you can imagine, it didn't make the news, so most people just don't know about it. After years of successfully remote viewing military bases with confirmed findings, they stepped up his game quite a bit by having him remote view Jupiter, and then later confirmed his findings via unmanned probe. He was then ready for one of the weirdest and scariest jobs of his entire career, which was to remote view activity on the moon with specific coordinates. So I'm just gonna read this account straight out of his book. Hearing this though, please remember that everything here is backed up by CIA documents.
I found the kitty. Look at this guy. We're just taking a little break, but look at this guy. Isn't that the cutest little thing you've ever seen in your life? Look at this little fucker. Sorry, he must have been sleeping. He was hiding and sleeping, buddy. Yeah, you can just chill right here. Alright. Sorry. We're getting back to the moon.
Are also in the back of the book, but easily searchable online. Axel gave me moon coordinates. I found towers, machinery, lights of different colors, strange looking buildings. I found bridges whose function I couldn't figure out. One of them just arched out and never landed anywhere. There were a lot of domes of various sizes, something to keep in mind for later. Round things like small saucers with windows. These were stored next to crater sides, sometimes in caves, sometimes in what looked like airfield hangars. And another thing to keep in mind, considering what the Apollo astronauts saw on the crater side when they landed and reported on the channel B of their transmission feed. We'll get to that. I found long tube-like things, machinery tractor-like things going up and down hills, straight roads extending some miles, obelisks that had no apparent function. There were nets over craters, houses in which someone had obviously lived.
Whoa, he's got a cat too.
I couldn't see who, save in some cases.
I got a cat in my lap as well.
I saw some kind of people busy at work on something that I could not figure out. The place was dark. The air, and air is in quotes in here, was filled with a fine dust, and there was some kind of illumination, like a dark lime green fog or mist. The thing about them was that they either were human or looked exactly like us. They were all males. You have a sausage fest on the moon, I guess. They seemed to be digging into a hillside or a cliff. But being there in my psychic state, as I felt I was, some of those guys started talking excitedly. Two of them pointed in my direction. Immediately, I felt like running away, and that's in quotes as well, and hiding, which I guess I psychically did since I lost sight of this particular imaging. I think they have spotted me, Axel. This is in quotes. He's talking to the CIA agent at this point. They were pointing at me, I think. How could they do that unless... ... They have some kind of high psychic perceptions too. Axel said, that is a CIA agent, in a calm, low voice, please come back away from that place quickly. My eyes were wide as understanding drained in. Quote, you already know they were psychic, don't you? Axel raised his eyebrows and gave a deep sigh. And at that point, he abruptly closed his folders and said, I think we had better end our work here today. He became a little agitated and he said, it's very difficult for us to assess any of this, Axelrad began. We don't know, but they do have things and capabilities we are trying to understand is very apparent. I read it twice. That sentence is read, it's read weird. Ingo Swan continues, if it's telepathy, it's a different kind, at least from how it is understood here on Earth. It's not just telepathy either. When they saw me, they couldn't really see me, could they? Question mark. What then were they seeing? Rather sort of like a ripple in some kind of cross-dimensionality. They knew what the ripple meant, like a sort of penetration of where they were, which the book is called Penetration. That's how they got the name Penetration for the book. It's not what you might be thinking. Only those guys, they were going to hone in on it, the ripple that is. At least that's the best way to describe it. Axelrod then reminded me of my pledge of 10 years of confidentiality. Not to worry, Axel, I replied. I have no intention of demolishing my official research work work by introducing something so far out as claiming that I have seen extraterrestrials working away on the moon, no one would believe me anyway. I have abided by that promise well past the 10-year mark, I guess. The reasons I have now decided to write about all of this will become clear in later chapters, which I probably shouldn't have read because I'm not going to. But I mean, get this bitch. It's outstanding. Illustrations that he drew after his remote viewing, and keep that in mind for later. Photographs were taken later that match those that we didn't have at the time that those were drawn. Now, there are people working with NASA who have come forward, but we rarely hear about their accounts, as you might imagine. George Leonard wrote a book called Somebody Else is on the Moon. What makes Leonard's book special is that he had access to NASA photographs that were untouched. Photos that are supposed to be public domain, considering that, I mean, they're funded by our tax-paying dollars.
Yes.
Many of these photos, strangely enough, match our sketches drawn by Ingo Swann, our remote viewer extraordinaire. Leonard was out to prove his theory that a highly advanced underground civilization working on the surface of the moon. And the evidence that he brought forward is absolutely staggering. Some photos that he had access to include NASA photo 71-H-781 and NASA photo 66-H-1293 that you can Google yourself after this video, by the way. I'll put them up on the screen. Both of which show an irrefutable towering structure, and these kind of photos are not rare, as we'll see in a bit. It is said that the astronauts of Apollo 14 were expecting to see this rig when they arrived, referring to it as Annabelle. The following transmission conversation took place. She's sitting right on the ledge and must be over a mile high. Did you see that? Exclamation point. The light flares coming from the dark part of the crater just below Annabelle. Oh, cameras, don't fail us now, and unquote. Another NASA photo that he had access to is numbered Lunar Orbiter III-84M, a structure later referred to as the Shard or the Tower. Penetration by Ingo Swann also reads, the probability that our lunar satellite, the moon, was not solid was first mentioned in 1962. Several new studies were undertaken. These new studies ended up with much the same results. Finally, Dr. Sean Solomon of MIT reported in Astronautics in February 1962 that the lunar orbiter experiments vastly improved our knowledge of the moon's gravitational field, indicating the frightening possibility that the moon might be hollow. And then it goes on to say, frightening, question mark. What indeed is the significance of that word? Worth noting is that the expeditions to the moon had more agenda than just walking on it. We had on record plans to colonize the moon in order to harvest the natural resources for profit. And there's really no surprise as to that goal. But what is surprising is that those plans were completely forgotten about and left behind after our little visit. To me, this indicates that something frightening happened. As you know, we haven't been back to the moon, and that technology has supposedly been destroyed, preventing us from ever going back, I guess. This might be why the clear 8mm footage that the astronauts took while on the moon has been lost. Or at least that's what NASA tells us what happened to it. All we have is the live feed that may or may not be legitimate. That's a whole nother debate.
Super not real.
It ain't. But what it seems like to me is that we did go to the moon, but we just played the footage that was filmed on Earth in case the astronauts were to die on the way. This would, of course, guarantee that we win the space race. But the film that the astronauts themselves took while on the moon is gone. And I think it's safe to say that that's bullshit. We don't just lose the most valuable bit of video that mankind has ever had. People who say that we didn't go to the moon often refer to this interview with Neil Armstrong, where it is pointed out that the astronauts seemed bummed out. But we have to remember that Neil Armstrong disappeared from the public eye after this interview, and the look on their faces doesn't really equal bummed out if you look closely enough. If you look at the body language and the facial expressions of these astronauts, it's not disappointment, it's concealed fear. And what makes this even more strange is the reason Neil Armstrong disappeared from the public eye. It wasn't because he was shy. He spent the rest of his life searching fervently for a place called Agartha, something that I plan on covering on this channel. So why would the first man to walk on the moon get home only to ignore the public eye and leave his family and friends behind to use all of his funding available to search for an ancient mythological place underground? This to me is absolutely staggering. Of the 140,000 photos that Leonard went through, many of which have since then been retouched and portions eliminated, that include particular craters known for abundant activity. Craters named Plato, Timocharis, Timocharis, and Aristarchus have been noted by astronomers for hundreds of years to have a regularity of strange lights and colored fogs and even domes that seem to appear and disappear. As weird as it sounds, civilians today have access to telescopes as good or better than our ancient astronomers did. You can at home see these very phenomena for yourself, you know, something that we are frankly conveniently too busy for. And there is no surprise that these are precisely the areas that every rover and manned mission has completely avoided, despite these regions being flat. This reminds us of how rovers sent to Mars very purposefully avoid portions of Mars called Cydonia. Cydonia has the famous Mars face and the pyramids native to it. Cydonia is otherwise completely flat and perfect for rovers, but instead we send rovers to more mountainous and rocky regions. And by the way, it's illegal to go to Cydonia. Illegal for both governments and the civilians. After this video, do yourself a fun favor and Google the reason why. A bit more from Penetration here. On October 12th, 1954, astronomers utilizing the telescope at Edinburgh Observatory to examine the moon was able to observe a dark sphere travel in a straight line from the crater Tycho to the crater Aristarchus that we mentioned earlier. Both of these craters otherwise demonstrating numerous light phenomenon of one kind or another. The distance covered by the sphere took, quote, a period of 20 minutes, and this roughly calculated to a speed of nearly 6,000 miles per hour. In September of the same year, a similar object had been sighted by two men using a 6-inch telescope, which is available to civilians. For over 40 minutes, they watched it leave the northern area of Mare, Humboldtianum. There you go. And move upward out of the lunar atmosphere into space. It is important here to recall that small-scale telescopic resolution requires lunar objects to be very large-scale in order to be perceived. The spherical objects must have been quite large, say about 1 to 4 or 5 miles in dimension. NASA is a bit sloppy at times, and they have accidentally let a couple things slip. Two photos showing extraordinary crafts seem to have escaped censorship and airbrushing. In July 1969, they accidentally captured a clear photo of a glowing cigar-shaped object close to the lunar surface. This can be seen in NASA photo number 11-37-5438. And another cigar-shaped object in 1972. This one was very large. It seemed to be glowing white and close enough to the lunar surface to cast its equally elongated shadow. This particular one was numbered as NASA photo 1619.
Got the kitty in the pod over here.
If this video isn't weird enough by now, buckle your seatbelts for this next part. Maurice Chaitlin stated in his book, Our Ancestors Came from Space, quote, when Apollo 11 landed moments before Armstrong stepped down the ladder, two UFOs hovered overhead. The astronauts were not limited to equipment troubles. They saw these things during their mission that could not be discussed with anybody outside NASA. It is very difficult to obtain any specific information from NASA, which still exceeds a very strict control over any disclosure of these events. And who exactly is Maurice, you might ask? Well, he was in charge of designing and building the Apollo communication and data processing systems for NASA. So the word crackpot doesn't quite work here, does it? Indeed, this man being in charge of communications heard all of the transmissions that we didn't. And apparently at the time, he didn't know of the very heavy disclosure taking place, because what the astronauts saw on the moon was somewhat of a surprise to everybody. So this piece of literature that he published certainly got him in great trouble. And by the way, both books mentioned above are extraordinarily rare, as they have been pulled from printing presses despite their success. So I might as well put this out there. If anybody has access to these discontinued books, let me know about it and I'll have you on the show. Let's talk about it. So we have overwhelming evidence to show that the moon was built and it is inhabited by something extremely powerful. And the evidence that we have against this case is simply that it just can't be so. That's the argument, that it just can't be.
It's like my favorite argument on anything.
Truth is stranger than fiction. Do people not understand nowadays? Lately?
My favorite argument to any of like my craziest, the argument to like my craziest theories is like, well, that couldn't happen. And it's like, well, what do you mean though? That's all you have to say? Because I come at people with like this kind of, this kind of data. Like, well, what about this? What about this? What about this? What about these things? All these things pointing to the fact that the moon's a hollow satellite. It's like, well, no, it couldn't be. Okay. Oh, okay.
As to what is going on up there. And can our mammal brains even comprehend something this strange if we were to find an answer? In the classic book, Who Built the Moon, a hypothesis is stated as follows. The moon was engineered by an unknown agency circa 4.6 billion years ago to act as an incubator to promote intelligent life on Earth. The unknown agency knew that humanoids would be the result of the evolutionary chain, and keep the 10 fingers thing in mind for a bit later. That unknown agency wanted the resulting humanoids to know what had been done, and they left a message indicated by the dynamics of the moon, which reminds us of these impossible eclipses. If the moon is a device, it is overtly obvious that it has a purpose beyond observation. After all, it sustains intelligent life on Earth. With that in mind, it would be almost self-evident that this makes the Earth itself a kind of incubator. Life on Earth is weird. The vast differences between humans and every other animal, the absurd way that we have set up systems of money and credit, and the loneliness of this planet is enough to raise questions like, where is all the other life forms? I mean, we've all asked the question, why is life super abundant on Earth and seemingly not anywhere else? And what are the chances? If Earth is an incubator and the moon observes and sustains it, and we are cut off from all other planetary life, that makes us, well, an experiment. It makes us a petri dish on a macrocosmic level, or perhaps even a kind of farm. I can't help but be reminded of our videos on this channel concerning Gnostic lore, but anywho, Socrates states that we should follow the evidence no matter where it leads. This means to throw out old beliefs if new information comes forward. This is very difficult when it comes to this moon information, but we have to do it. We have to face that monster. We have always known that Earth was unique. That is self-evident. But these findings show us that it is somehow unique on purpose and by design. So here we go. The big question: is this experiment set up and meant for us to grow and self-realize? You know, to see if material beings that are half animal, half divine, transcend the limitations of matter, like as if they are rooting for us? Or are we being used and studied by cold-hearted beings that would equate to us testing products on animals?
What do you think,
or
buddy?
worse yet, as a fuel source? This is where we turn to mythology. Megalithic structures the world over have been built to send a message from the distant past. The pyramids are a perfect example of ancient people going out of their way to teach us our place in the solar system. This seems to be no different than the impossible anomalies on the moon. In numerous portraits of the Buddha, for example, while displaying the cycle of samsara, you know, of life and death, he has been illustrated pointing to the moon. Various alchemical manuscripts seem to make it clear that the moon represents something which is made to be temporary. Keep this in mind for the end of the video, but in fact, the belligerent absurdities of the moon itself seem to be a bit of a message to us in some way, shape, or form that we just have not grown up enough to understand. Eclipses are a perfect example of that. We have roughly concluded that eclipses have been designed by some kind of unseen hand or technology. This really does seem like a message or a code. But what is strange about these numbers concerning the sun, moon, and earth ratios and numerous other mathematical anomalies of the moon is that they are in base 10 mathematical formula. This is not just a projection of our math. They would be in base 10 mathematics without us having crunched the numbers. But we just so happen to have 10 fingers. Whatever created the moon seemed to have done this on purpose as well, as it gives us a huge head start in those very mathematics. Almost like this moon problem was meant to be figured out. This is good for the optimistic side of our hypothesis, as anyone feeding on us or using us as an experiment would not have given us any hints like this. However, on the pessimistic side, it is worth noting that moon lore in mythology often illustrates a sort of animalistic transformation into a negative archetype, such as in lycanthropy. In the Gnostic Apocrypha of John, it is indicated that man was built by angels and demons coming together as a team. It just doesn't say why. Genesis 1:16 states, quote, God made two great lights, the greater lights to rule the day and the lesser lights to rule the night. With this in mind, we need to remember that science seems to show that life on Earth can be sustained without the moon, but intelligent life cannot. Whoever built the moon obviously wanted us to become intelligent and to become self-realized. And this throws a giant wrench in the newest black cube conspiracy about a soul recycler. And this is coming from a guy who is partially responsible for the upsurge in that conspiracy. I mean, I see clips of myself everywhere now by people proposing that very notion, but if you ask me, that particular conspiracy seems to stem from us taking symbology and allegory as literal, a problem that we seem to have reoccurring with both religion and fringe conspiracies. We gotta be careful with that. But let's take that literally for a moment. Many of you have pointed out to me about the Saturn video that we have, that Jupiter and Saturn were once upon a time much closer to Earth. Now, I don't know if that's true or not, but I do know that if it were the case, in order for the moon to be put in the place that it is, those planets would have needed to be moved back and out of the way. Otherwise, the whole thing just kind of falls apart. So even with the deepest conspiracy taken literally, I still can't help but feel like the entire solar system was designed for the benefit of mankind. I don't know if that came to the microphone or not. I'm leaving it in. We are meant to realize something, but we have not grown up enough to read the language. There is something urgently beckoning us to evolve intellectually and spiritually enough to self-realize. If anything is feeding on our suffering, it is the drunken stupor of mankind itself against itself. Despite this being obvious, it is very hard to psychologically accept. Therefore, theories would easily slip down that slope into, lizard people and whatnot. Now, I'm not disregarding those conspiracies, and they do, in fact, hold my attention, but that is just not what I am personally getting out of it. Whatever or whoever built the moon had no such heinous agenda in mind. I think it seems to be quite the opposite. Like it was designed for us to awaken from our reptilian minds. So although the moon does not produce light itself, it reflects the sunlight. This is why it is compared in alchemical manuscripts to the snake shedding its skin, symbolizing something that is temporary, that is projected by something that is permanent and unchanging. But what this also points to is a symbolizing of the moon as a beacon of hope in the night. And although this is a symbol or a metaphor, it is important to remember that symbols and metaphors always points to a greater literal truth. We need to realize that there is more complexity to this subject than just good and evil. There might be a third direction that our dualistic thinking is just currently blind to. But what we are no longer blind to is the self-evident strangeness of one of the largest and most obvious objects in the sky. And it all makes me wonder exactly what else out there is both impossible and also simultaneously true.
So he thinks the moon is bringing us intelligence, and it's for us, helping us like wake up and advance. I don't know though. I don't know if I'm convinced on that. Seems like it I don't know, creates madness. And he said that it supports, like, all life will be supported on Earth without a moon, except for intelligent life. I don't know about that though. I don't know about that. He didn't really show me any evidence of that. He just showed me a picture of like a dude eating somebody, like a werewolf. And I tell you, after the last full moon we just had, bro, I gotta get that shit the fuck out of my face. Moon, man. Talk about a crazy couple weeks. That shit fucked me up. Not just like me, but like, god damn, the people around me. It was like every other interaction I had with someone was like someone just having a bad time. Not even necessarily towards me, but just like in general. I'm like, gosh, guys, I I'm still pretty convinced we need to get rid of it. This kind of like told me we need to like push that shit the fuck out of my face. The Chani experiment made a lot of sense. He never mentioned that. I don't think he's ever heard of that. But that's all right. He does a lot of research. But I don't know. I like what he does. I like this guy. I'll probably do some more of his videos. Look into some of his stuff. Probably just watch more on my free time too. Entertaining, interesting, thought provoking. Backs it all up with stuff. Go give him a follow, Library of the Untold. I subscribed. Check it out. This guy's cool. I'll look at more of his stuff. Yeah. Alright, well. I got this kitty I gotta take care of. I gotta make myself some dinner too, so. See ya.